All right. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Ron. How are you doing?
Wonderful. It's webinar day. Love webinar days.
Same here. Very excited about this one. We're going to be talking today about buying groups, and we're going to go into detail about the product detail pages. Let's
Yeah,
get it
I love
started.
that. All right. Sounds great. So let's talk briefly about what a product detail page is. So I want to make sure everybody understands that. The basics, if you've ever gone to, pennies.com, dillards.com, and you're searching for clothing and you click on tops and it comes up and shows you all the different tops. Well, when it shows you all the different kinds that are available, that would be what we would call the category landing page, right? So you've got women's tops, men's tops, sports tops. And then when you click on men's tops or men's dress shirts, and then you go in and you're now looking at all those products and you go, that's a shirt I like. And you click on that shirt, we are now looking at what we call the product details page. It provides all the details about that product or potentially service that someone may be buying. So the great thing about this is you can get extremely detailed about the item that's being sold. So I want you to talk briefly, just go ahead and give your definition. I mean, obviously I've kind of guided people so they know from a perspective what page we're physically talking about, but go ahead and talk specifically about what that page really is.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. And, one of the things that I like to think about with buying groups on the product detail page is this is where someone's going to be determining what quantity they're going to need to purchase of something, maybe what the price break is based on their particular account. There may be some communication that happens with some of our buying groups. There is a chat that's built in, so there can be a dynamic kind of aspect to that. It may include showing lead times and show a kind of visual representation of filling up a container or some form of shipment, all on the product detail page. There may be an option for some of our buying groups that we have customized their product detail page. There may be an option to select from multiple manufacturers or distribution points to fulfill the same item. So the singular item that's on that product detail page could be fulfilled by multiple different distribution centers, and there can be different lead times. So I almost think of it as like a huddle or like
Yeah.
a planning point. And this is a little different with buying groups than it is with a typical kind of product detail page, because usually with the buying group, we are looking to take advantage of, as the name implies, buying as a group or a group purchasing organization and enabling the user to deal with the logistical overhead in a self-service kind of a way. And really making that intelligent requires that that product detail page match your business and match your buying group and really match the schedules and the needs of the buyers, which typically just, again, means self-service. And so, depending on the business, Ron, this page is going to change a lot, right? Like we'll have very different outputs of what this page will look like.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You mentioned one about different distribution areas, so I'll give a quick example of that. And you're right, it couldn't be more different for buying groups because if you think about it, buying groups, like Chris said, are usually buying at a discount. They're usually buying in volume. For example, we had one client of ours that sold railroad ties, right? And we were building a system. And so when these buying groups would come in and buy, these groups would be like building and doing the landscaping for like coliseums. So they would be ordering like 75,000 of these things. So you're talking intermodal shipping and multiple, not only multiple containers, but multiple train cars and multiple locations. And they can't obviously store 75,000 on their lot. They don't have that. So what they'll do strategically is they'll say, I need shipments over time. I need to schedule that out. Or they may come back and go, all right, for the first lot, we need 4,000 of them for the east parking lot. And they go look, and let's say they're in Salt Lake City, and out of the Denver warehouse, there's only 2,000. And they're like, oh no, there's not enough to fulfill quickly. So where's the next closest warehouse? Seattle. All right, well, Seattle's got 25,000. So let's get the 2,000 from Denver coming immediately, and then let's source the other 2,000 from Seattle. But because the lead time for Seattle's 14 days, we'll be a little bit late on the east parking lot, but we can get a jump start on the west parking lot. So let's go ahead and get half of the west parking lot ordered as well. So you can see the logistics of that versus me going to Dillard's and buying a shirt. not even in the same planet, right? So yeah, buying group logistics can be extremely complex, and we definitely need that functionality. So now that we kind of understand what that is, let's talk about the level of detail that needs to be on that page, and talk about some of those features and things that are available. Now, I know this will be a little bit difficult. So what we'll do, because you and I will always hedge to go back to our product and go, well, these are all the details that we have in our platform, right? So we'll kind of keep coming back to that, but we'll try to make it as vague as we can and just say these are the ones that we feel are the most important. So if you're looking at other platforms, also make sure that it has the ability to do this additional level of detail. We'll use a term a lot as Chris starts going through some of these technical fields. We'll use a term. We'll use both dependency a lot. And there's another one here that I can't remember. I was just thinking about, and I'll get it back in a second. So if you want to start diving through the details, go ahead and jump in and start talking about some of the different fields that are available, the dependency, and the numbers that might be required.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. So, yeah, whenever you're looking at a product detail page for a buying group, some of the core things, of course, that matter are having the meta information, especially if it needs to be searchable, schema information properly indexable. In a lot of cases, buying groups will show everything about their catalog except for the pricing. So this can be accomplished without any issue if you want to operate that way, or maybe show like retail pricing or web pricing without someone having an account. And then the user specific pricing is much lower once they log in um, for members, essentially. And then in addition, of course, we want to have immersive imagery. But then beyond that, and those are just kind of standard capabilities. But beyond that, it's absolutely important to be able to show the right quantity breaks. And typically, this is going to be just a part and parcel with the group purchasing process. So there will typically be quantity breaks. There may also be a timeline to be able to participate in an active group order. There may be some lead time information that's helpful to show the user. It depends on the particular industry and the items that you're providing as part of the buying group. But if you need that, it is possible to show. And then, of course, the actual inventory data so that someone can see, what if they want to order all of the items like you were talking about, Ron, with the different locations and possibly even time that out so they can get shipments at different times. So these are all necessities for most buying groups. There are also typically going to be different suppliers, and they may have synonyms, but not the exact same ways of labeling things. Maybe different, variations of the same underlying product. So it's really important to be able to compare the products and just verify that they are the same thing effectively for what you need. In addition, it's also really helpful just overall if you're working with a bunch of different vendors who are providing products within the buying group, that the detail page have the complete information for each of those different vendors. So there may be information about the business. We may want to show ratings or reviews for each of those suppliers that we're going to be purchasing from or allowing purchasing from, etc. And then, of course, typically with every item that's part of the buying group, one of the big advantages the buying group can provide is it can provide this kind of standardization of the variations and the just kind of, if you think about like a uniform that you might purchase as a franchise. And we work with a lot of franchises that purchase from buying groups and a lot of very large franchises. And so they might purchase uniforms for their staff. And there are 12 different colors of uniform that are possible to order. But they really just want, two for this particular account for all of the franchises. So do we have the ability to restrict the variations of a product based on the account or the franchise in this case that we're working with? And that's a pretty interesting capability that just kind of makes it easier for the buyers within those different franchise groups that are purchasing from your buying group, right?
Yeah.
In addition, another really key aspect that we see a lot is, we talked a little bit about notifications in one of the previous webinars. Being able to see, what the inventory is, order up whatever they need, but possibly being notified when additional inventory is available, and possibly having the ability to notify the sellers, notify the suppliers, hey, if you can get more inventory of this amount, we would order it. And that can be really helpful as well, so that this can be negotiated, etc. And then finally, you have some of the more standard fields like the description, having a nice, friendly HTML description if desired, really capable of handling any data fields like product data sheets, possibly spec documents or diagrams. In a lot of cases, our clients have dynamically generated um, schema diagrams that show how the device or the item is constructed, and possibly like a rollover, kind of an exploded view, if you will, of the variations, or maybe like the kit items, the items that are part of that kit. Um, a lot of times we'll also include, tabs for reviews, um, tabs for immersive media, maybe videos or instructions or support. And really, the list goes on, Ron. And this is one of the most exciting things about working with different buying groups, is they tend to have a really specific need for the end customers, and being able to provide that is, it's really exciting to be able to do that. But I would say ultimately those are some of the fundamental things that you're going to want to look for, and it really kind of centers around like a standard product detail page plus all of the pieces that are required to help someone decide if they can purchase something of that size quantity, and with that appropriate lead time, and just kind of setting up a complex purchase in many cases, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about um, a couple of the things that you just mentioned there. You talked about potentially buying only two colors of the approved uniform for a franchise, right? Well, one of the things that you can do, at least in a platform like ours, that you may want to look at is the ability to have multiple stores. And these stores can be a custom filtered store within the massive PIM or with the product database. So let's give that example. So let's say I carried 1,000 items at Costco, right? I'm Costco and I'm the buying group owner, and I'm allowing buying groups like restaurants and things like that to come to me. Well, let's say Chris owns a restaurant and he comes to my store, Costco, and he shops and he goes, wow, you got a lot of great prices on a few things. These are the 12 things that I want to buy from you. I want to buy in large quantities and I want to buy often. And so I sign up a contract with him. I let him purchase on account. But Chris is like, I don't trust my employees at all my different restaurants to ensure that they order the right colors of the uniforms with the right logo and the right equipment for the kitchen that you're selling that I've approved. So what can happen is you can have a store within a store and they can have their own branded store. So let's say it's Chris's store. So I could have a URL called chris'sstore.costco.com. And when any employee logs into that store, only the 12 products that we've added to that store from the master database would even show up. And anybody that logs into that account would only see the appropriate variations of colors of uniforms that Chris has approved. Because it's its own store, we can do additional customizations like adding, hey, we could add custom pricing rules and custom pricing approval workflows. So let's say, for example, Chris allows anybody at any of the franchises to order up to $500, but anything over that has to go back to him for approval. So now that might be different than every other client buying from me. But because we've given them their own store now, I can go in and customize their checkout process completely. So it'll go through an approval process, check to see how many dollars it is. And if it's over the 500, it'll come up and say, you've hit the $500 threshold. This needs to be sent to corporate for approval. If you want to remove some things, you can check out, or we're going to need to send this to corporate for approval. Would you like to proceed as what's in the cart currently, or go back and edit the cart, right? And we can give this guided experience very specific to Chris and his franchise. So you can get extremely customizable. Chris also mentioned something about different part numbers. So, for example, we have one of our clients that had been on our platform for, gosh, I sold it. I'd been here a year, so nine and a half years ago. They've been on our platform. 50 million SKUs in a single storefront. Just wrap your head around those kinds of numbers. Do they warehouse 50 million products? No, they do not. They warehouse 3 million products, which is still a crazy number. The other 47,000 SKUs are basically, they've been in the business for 75 years, and parts that were sourced, 37 years ago that are no longer manufactured because they used to source those and they had them in stock, and now they hold the replacement parts. Those other 47 million SKUs are competitive part numbers, OEM part numbers, replacement part numbers that have been end of life and now replaced by new part numbers. So if I had let's just give an example. If I had a water heater that was 37 years old and a part went out on it, and I went searching for that part, I could literally go to that website, put that part number in, and although they don't carry that part, the website in the background knows about that part, knows the part number, and knows today's replacement part for that, right? So that was kind of when you were talking about the different thing. The other thing that we didn't add that I'd love you to talk briefly about is quoting. Because when you get into buying groups and you start doing significant volumes, there might be a need for you to do quoting, right? Where I can go in and, like you said, the retail price may be visible, but the wholesale price isn't. So now I log in and I see that, let's go back to those railroad ties. I want to buy 75,000. Well, they don't know that because I'm only buying 2,000 today. But if I buy 70,000, will you give me a better price? And so maybe I want to convert that, and instead of buying right now, maybe I want to ping you and contact the seller, if you will, right, as a buying group, and say, hey, listen, my neighbor also owns a landscaping firm. And if we buy together and place our orders together because we share a warehouse and ship always, we're going to be buying twice as much. And even this first order is going to be 75,000 units. What kind of price could we negotiate, right? And so kind of like the chat feature that you mentioned, there would be a custom quoting feature where there can be some communication. So talk briefly about the different types of communications that we provide that a client might want to look for.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. And yeah, the quoting thing is really interesting because typically the way I like to think about it is if a quote is needed, there's an opportunity possibly to kind of help provide more information. And specifically on two fronts. One, within the business itself, because in some cases we find that clients just don't know that a lot of their process that they're doing manually can be automated. And in many cases, in fairness, they know it can be automated too. They just haven't gotten to it. For a lot of our clients, they're growing very rapidly. And this is just kind of a progression of the business that we're coming into the picture and we're helping them automate more of the process. But usually, the other big piece is the end user themselves may not be willing to make a large purchase without going through a quoting process. And they may need to deal with a very complicated logistics issue. And a lot of times that drives quotes. So they may actually need to deal with a complicated delivery or a complex, very detailed engineering diagram or, something of that nature that's going to prevent them, right, from just immediately ordering on the site. So a quote process, generally speaking, needs to be thought of as kind of like a opportunity to make as much of it as self-service as possible. And where it's not possible to make it self-service, we do want to automate everything and in particular, manage the expectations. And I probably can't say that enough. So whenever
Yeah.
there is a quote, we want to say how long we think it's going to take, what kind of lead time there is between each step, essentially, and then also what are all of the steps? What are the steps typically to complete this process? Is there anything that the quote recipient can do to kind of move it along quickly? And ultimately, the bottom line here is that normally email is going to be a primary form of communication to just verify that the quote was received. But usually, depending on the availability of the team within the buying group, or even possibly, if we want to open it up to the sellers or the suppliers to be able to communicate with the buyers, with the members, we can do that too. But they're going to have to be available to participate in a chat if we want to turn that on. So a lot of times what we do, Ron, and I know you know about this, is we'll turn on a chat, but it has a hybrid capability where if someone isn't available on either end, whether it's the buyer or the supplier or the buying group, it will just accumulate into a message via email or whatever the preferred mechanism is for notifications. So that could be text, it could be email, or some other format. But ultimately, this would be kind of the means of communication would be through that chat tool, which would then accumulate itself into a inbox within the platform itself, as well as an email notification that would go out with relevant information. And then typically, what we see is someone requests items. It may be part of a standard checkout. So they may have a standard set of items that they would be able to purchase right away. And then a few of those items would be part of a quote. And so we can go ahead and process their traditional order without any delay. And then the quote itself goes through a separate workflow. And for many of our clients, this will be a check on the shipping. They may not have their logistics fully automated. Again, just kind of as a hint for the listeners, this is absolutely something that can be heavily automated. So if you're not aware of that, feel free to reach out to us. We're going to, of course, continue to be doing webinars and we'll kind of get into more detail on this. But it's usually around logistics, shipping. It may be related to large orders, large order quantities, etc., or maybe even a customization that needs to occur. And there needs to be a verification of that before a large quantity of items are produced with possibly a detail that's off, right? And so ultimately, those are some of the big things, Ron, that I see, that folks are using quotes for. There are a lot more, of course. I'd love to hear any other examples that you're thinking of and kind of some of the nuances that might apply too.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned it. You said something about opening it up to suppliers. And I don't think they fully understand the power of that feature in quoting, right? So, for example, we did one company and they didn't store or warehouse any products at all. They had 281 suppliers. Those 281 suppliers had seller dashboards within our platform. So our client was the one that owned the buying group site. And then the 281 vendors that they had relationships with could come in and upload their products, set their own price, set their own hard and soft stops, which is very customized for buying groups, right? We'll probably have a chapter that we'll need to cover a webinar just strictly talking about hard and soft stops. Like a hard and soft stop for the audience, real quick. Like when I go to Costco and I try to buy ketchup, they've got a hard stop. I have to buy it in a pack of 12, right? Or a pack of 2, whatever it is, because you're buying in bulk. And so I can't go there and just pull it apart and say, well, I only need one. You have to literally buy in bulk. And that's a hard stop, right? A soft stop would be something like, hey, we normally sell this by the case. If you want to buy it separate, you got to pay a $50 fee for us to crack open the case and sell you singularly, right? And that would be a hard and soft stop. But the ability to compete. So let's say, for example, I wanted to go into the buying group and all the products were drop shipped. And there were 3 suppliers that sold pool pumps. And so I'm a contractor and I'm doing 3 different hotels right now. And so I need 100 pumps. And these pumps average about $1,300 a piece. I think was last I paid to replace my pool pump was about $1,300. So if I'm buying 100 pumps at $1,300, that's a chunk of change. I'd like to be able to save some money. So maybe what I do is instead of just contacting the seller, since there are 5, 6, 7, half a dozen vendors that sell pool pumps, I don't necessarily have to have the Pentair Ventaflow or whatever one I bought. I might put it out to bid. So I could go into the buying group and I could say, hey, I need a quote. This is the specs. This is the number of gallons in each pool. These are the pumps that I need. And I might want to put it out to bid. And then kind of like you were saying about the setting the expectations of the communication, right? I might put it out to bid and say this bid is open for 5 days or whatever the timeline is, right? You can go in and maybe that is part of the quoting process when I go to put it in is I need a price back within X number of days because I need to order. I need to know what the lead times are because I have to start assembling these pools. We're building construction right now. Pools have to be on site within 2 to 4 weeks, right? And so part of that quoting process might be the ability to put that quote in as an open bidded quote for allowing multiple vendors to quote on that. And then they can come back, and one might come back and say, well, I don't have those with that particular voltage. Everything else you said is fine. The voltage is this on my units. Is that okay? Do you have enough electricity in the panel to carry these? These actually have more volts, but I'll honor this price. And so they, again, need to be able to communicate back and forth and ask each other questions and deal with some things. So the ability, what is the base price? What is the discounted price? Can I contact the seller to get a better price? Can I put it in for quote to possibly get in a cooperative bidding war to get a better price from multiple vendors? Are there any other discounts available? What happens if, because I'm a buying group, but I'm also buying for a church, we own a 3C50, what is it, 3C503, right? We're a nonprofit organization, so we don't have to pay taxes. So I know I can save that. Is there a discount for nonprofits? Is there a discount because we're VA or disabled or minority-owned business, right? There are a lot of different things that a lot of businesses will honor and provide additional discounts to. So they're already given a discount because it's a buying group. So, how do we handle any other additional considerations? And do we let people know? What are the requirements for said discount? You have to have an ARP card, an AARP card, right? Do we visually show those price breaks? If I go in and check the box that says, yes, I've got an AARP card, I get a AAA discount, and I'm, whatever my other requirements are, I check all the boxes. Does it visually show me what my price would be, or does everything become a manual process that takes multiple days? Right. And then finally, and we already kind of covered it with railroad ties, we want to make sure that we can display the inventory so that I know what's available to make it easy to make that buying purchase. So moving on, I mentioned this early on. I want you to talk about a little bit about the attributes, how they can be dependent and non-dependent, and dynamic content, right? Because dynamic content is something we obviously specialize in, and that could be customer specific, it could be buying group specific, it could be membership specific, it could be what day of the week it is. There's 100 things it could be, right? That's kind of the definition of dynamic, but I'd love you to go into the technicality of what dynamic content provides and some of the capabilities you can have with
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. And yeah, this one's really interesting because many buying groups offer different product lines and different categories within their kind of their niche offerings. And a lot of buying groups are either, an industry or a niche or multiple niche focus areas. But there tends to be some specialization that drives that buying group. And this can be a logistical challenge within the technical implementation of the site, depending on what kind of platform you're using. Because depending on kind of, let's just take an example to make it more concrete, but let's say that it is kitchen supplies for a large franchise, kind of a group that sells kitchen supplies and kitchen equipment for franchises. So it could be all kinds of different franchises. They all need certain kitchen equipment and kitchen supplies. Well, the product detail page for just a basic set of, let's say, mixing bowls is probably not going to be as sophisticated as the product details page for a very nice commercial grade oven that is going to be purchased. And there may be specific measurements that need to be input into each of the product details for the ovens that will be purchased. And there may be certain variants of add-ons that can be purchased with the kitchen equipment, the oven, for example. Whereas the mixing bowl may just be a simple, just add to cart. Like, do you want this or not? And, one of the things that we see a lot of is we'll create a really nice, dynamically generated grid that shows some of the variance and allows the user to kind of compare the measurements and maybe some of the performance attributes. And this can load dynamically based on it being a certain type of product. So the end user can literally see a really nice kind of table view of the key data points of ovens and some of their variants. Um, Another example that we see a lot for, just kind of giving a concrete example again is the idea that whenever someone selects a certain kind of, a certain item, they may also need to purchase another associated item, or we may recommend that. And so these are some details that are really important for buying groups because if you think about it, you're going to have buyers who are making very substantial purchases in many cases. A lot of them are very sophisticated, but we want to provide a lot of value to them. And so when someone either chooses a certain product type, we want to show them the right information, keep it very simple where possible, but provide them with the full depth of detail, a really nice table, maybe some of the variants, maybe details around each of those variations, etc. And then if they, for any product, if they purchase something that has a kind of associated item, or they're looking to add an item to their cart that has an associated item, we probably want to go ahead and show the nuances of that, so that the user kind of gets that recommendation from us as a buying group. So we want to have an opinionated presentation on that product detail page. And that's probably where a lot of people are going to kind of wrap up their research and turn it into a purchase. So we want to make sure that they have it at their fingertips, that these are commonly associated purchases with this item. And again, like if they choose a variation, they're trying to pick which oven, and they choose a variation of an oven type, we probably want to show them details around, make sure you make these measurements. And here we could present dynamically, Ron, that these are the measurements that you need to make sure are available. This spot needs to be available within the kitchen. And make sure you leave these tolerances, and make sure you read this guide that talks about the electrical requirements. It's a 220 line instead of a 110, for example. And so those are some of the situations where the dynamic data can be really powerful. So we can kind of adapt the page, adapt the presentation, and pull in data dynamically based on what the user's looking at.
Yeah, I know one of the ones that we've done recently that I demo from quite often has all of the different government regulations that apply to them, and so they'll be going in looking for things and go, this has to be both FDA compliant and NIST compliant, or whatever. Right? There's compliancy seems to be for some of these very big, right? So they'll have to go in and the equipment has to be, or the software has to be compliant, or whatever. So compliancy is certainly one. Temperature requirements is certainly one. Chemical resistance and stuff is one that we've dealt a lot with, right? We do a lot of chemical companies and deal with hazmat and shipping across state lines. So there's definitely a lot of dynamic things that as you go and add things to your cart, and again, like I said, we'll talk about hard and soft stops in another chapter, but specific hard and soft stops or potentially specific hazmat requirements. It's okay if you buy this, but as soon as you put the shipping across state lines, that automatically triggers something. And so it would be nice not to have that a surprise during checkout, right? That's easy to do during checkout. Is there any way to know when I'm looking at the details of this chemical, are there any shipping restrictions? It would be nice to be able to research that while I'm on the product details page rather than be surprised when I go through the whole thing, finish my shopping and go to check out and then find out that I can't do it. Right. So love that about the dynamic content. The last slide here, we're going to talk about devices. And I know we've talked about this for others, like in the webinars we did for the auction platform, but let's talk briefly about, I'll kind of touch base on the SEO stuff, but if you want to talk about the devices and the accessibility and things like that, go ahead and jump into that. And then I'll touch briefly on the SEO. And then if we want, we can finish off with all the permissions and security and access control. And we'll just kind of tag team that one.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so accessibility and just mobile responsive, these are kind of two, heavily related topics nowadays. But the concept behind accessibility is making sure that different readers and different devices can access the site properly. And so this is something that we really design in from day one. There's no perfection here, but generally speaking, we encourage you to be asking about this regardless of what vendor you're working with on your buying group platform. Go ahead and ask them about their plan and how they audit for accessibility, and then how they deliver on that. And, accessibility requirements do change over time. So, how are they maintaining that as well over time? So anyway, accessibility is really, it should be built into the DNA of the delivery of the site. And it should just be something that everyone is like, yeah, that's really important. And we definitely do that. Here's how we take care of that. And then as far as mobile and just generally responsiveness of the designs, this again really just needs to be kind of part of the DNA of the whole delivery. And for us, we really focus on not just a responsive site, but also getting to a PWA or progressive web application so that the end user could, if the buying group wanted to, take advantage of having a mobile launch, and kind of having that experience be omni-channel, if you will, across the different devices. But ultimately, the main idea here is that there's architecture and planning around the presentation for not just desktop, not just tablet and mobile, and not just the kind of main browsers, but really having a standard for meeting all of the different channels that might come up over the many years that you're operating your site. And we really encourage you to be asking these questions. Ask how your partner is going to do this, and what their experience is with it, etc. That can be really, really helpful, right?
Yeah. And if you want to write this down, audience, when you're asking the questions, ask them about ADA, right? That's the American with Disability Act. Ask them about their ADA compliance and how they deal with that. Potentially about Section 508. That's the least low hanging fruit and the easiest to comply with. And then WCAG, WCAG. If you write those three things down, just ask them and record their results as you compare vendors and see how they deal with that. Because those are the three things that you mainly need to think about. As far as SEO, SEO is kind of an interesting one. It's kind of a 50-50. A lot of times with these buying groups, right? Like I've heard mixed reviews. Somebody said one time, I can buy from Costco even if I don't have a Costco membership. And I'm like, I don't even know how that's possible. Well, maybe Costco allows them in. Do they charge them the retail price? They can go ahead and buy, but they just have to pay retail. They don't get membership price. I don't know. Maybe they do. But my understanding, I guess GNC does that, right? I have a membership at GNC. And when we go buy our whey protein for my protein shakes, I get a discount because I have a GNC membership. But if I didn't have a membership, I could buy it full retail, I suppose. So maybe there's that. So with your store, your online store, is it a true closed off membership where it is contractual that these people come to me and they've negotiated the price? So SEO is not a play. I am not trying to drive traffic to my site. Or am I trying to drive, even though I do charge memberships, I'm still trying to drive and bring on new members constantly. So I need SEO. Remember, SEO is the gift that keeps on giving. It is the one that drives traffic to your site. CRO for the audience, conversion rate optimization, is once they're to the site, how can I ensure they have a good experience and I guide them toward buying or converting? So SEO and CRO are both important. They're equally important. You don't want to invite 100 people over to your house if your house is messy, right? The CRO would be garbage. The SEO would be great. Conversely, you don't want to go spend $10,000 and invite Oingo Boingo to play at your house and only invite 3 people over, unless they're your favorite 3 people and they have a great concert. This SEO is terrible, but the CRO is wonderful, right? So SEO and CRO are really important. They're married, they're tied at the hip, they're equally important. And they're 50-50 whether you always need CRO no matter what. You don't always need SEO. If it's a private party and you're not allowing it, and you're not telling anybody about the party, it's by invitation only, then there's no SEO. You still want them to have a good time at the party. And so CRO is still important. So even if SEO is not on your roadmap, I've had 3 or 4 people call me talking about buying groups and go, yeah, I don't care about SEO. And I'm like, what about CRO? Yeah, I don't care about that either. Yes, you do. Because everything we've just talked about for the last 30 minutes is all CRO. what is the experience? How do we guide? How do we know what the price is? How do we know what compliance is? How do we know where it ships from? Every bit of that is literally related to CRO, right? So let's let you finish out and talk about the final complex piece, right? Which is really the access control, scope control, maybe performance security of the site itself, things like that. Go ahead and go crazy with this one because this is obviously your
Yeah,
specialty.
well, thanks, Ron. You get me excited talking about it there. This may or may not be a super sexy topic for folks, but talking about permissions is really important for a lot of buying groups. Now, the first thing that I would say we typically hear a lot about here is just the idea of having a web based price or no price showing on the web. And in some cases, our clients will prefer that the site just not even be visible on the web unless someone is a member. So we can do any of those and variations therein. I mean, we can also not show inventory data, for example. And so, whether you work with us or another vendor, these are things that ought to be very doable. And fundamentally, the concept behind the permissions tends toward focusing on authentication and authorization. So, authentication is going to be just did someone successfully log into their account? And then authorization is going to be what does their account have a role for? What do they have access to as part of that account? So, what is it a member of essentially from a role perspective? And then the roles, within our platform, we literally have thousands of potential permissions that are very, very, very granular, down to specific pieces of the workflows. Like, can I view something? Can I add the item to my cart? Can I purchase it? Those are all controlled by different permissions. And this can be really helpful because if you think about it, you may have a buying group scenario where someone is the buyer and someone is, they're actually doing the research and they're putting the items in the cart, but they're not actually approving the order. So you may have a separate person who's approving the order. You may have a situation where, like we were talking about earlier, the different suppliers can provide bids. And then, there may be someone within the organization who is a controller or maybe a CEO or, someone like that who needs to make the purchase. There may be a threshold where after a certain threshold, only then do we give access to, or only then do we restrict purchasing for this particular role. And then, similarly speaking, there could also be specific buying group members who only have access to, these items if they're part of this group. So maybe they have to be part of the platinum rewards program, or maybe they're part of the 3% rewards, or they're a premium member, and then they get to see certain items. This could even include, for a lot of buying groups, it's not just about the purchasing, it's also about the industry knowledge and about the kind of best practices within the buying group. So you may have a digital offering that's informational, or training, etc., that you want to incorporate into being part of the buying group. This could be access to, a podcast or a media like a video or LMS course, and we can provide any and all of these as well. And so this is all tied into permissions. So as you can imagine, these would be things that would show up on the product detail pages, but we want to restrict this and show a nice message. I mean, we don't want to just say, red error, you can't access this. We want a nice presentation, right? And to really be kind of directing them through the process to upgrade their account over time too. Hopefully they're going to get into a position where they're going to upgrade their account. They're going to be really happy about it, and they'll continue to make large purchases as they go. And the permissions can really help drive that by controlling what people have access to based on their roles.
Yeah, I agree. And it may not even be the front end UI, right? You may have a separate role for the CFO. They're the only ones that can come in and pay the invoice off, right? So you've got people that could go in and put things in a cart and save a cart. Then you've got procurement managers that can come in and order, but only up to a certain dollar amount. Then you have management that can approve anything over that. Then you've got CFOs that end up paying the invoice later on. And that's just four simple roles that we came up with in 10 seconds. There could be hundreds of others. And like you said, I'll try to put a screenshot up here of a little snippet of some of those rights. I mean, we literally have thousands and thousands of unique abilities that can be assigned to a role, so you can have infinite control over what each of those roles can and can't do within our platform. You'll just, if you want to get into that granularity, make sure that whatever platform and vendor you're talking to can do that kind of thing, whatever solution they're looking at. If you want to see a demo, please give me a call. Visit us at clarity-ventures.com, schedule a demo. I'll jump on a call. I'll show all those to you in a live demo. Thanks for joining us today. Next time, Chris and I are going to dive into the advanced inventory and warehousing logistics. So that'll be a real fun one. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye for now.